the 29th, as we head into a new financial year, our first meeting for this year. Could we start with our normal karakia, please? Whakataka te hau ki te whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā tara tara ki tai, e hiaki ana te atakua, hei teo, hei hoka, hei hauhu, te hei maurora. So welcome to staff, members of the public that are in chambers or online, councillors that are here. We do have apologies from councillors Horowhenua and councillor Ketu, and noting the lateness for councillor Mitchell Kutap, seconded by Deputy Mayor Allen. All those in favour? So we do have a couple of members of the public who wish to talk to us today, and I'm going to invite Jonathan firstly to Jonathan Proctor, representing MTA. I'm just noting that Jonathan's speaking to an agenda item that is in our public excluded agenda, but welcome, Jonathan. Welcome back to the table. There was a comment regarding where's your tie, but
yeah, I'm not wearing a tie, sorry, but I had to trudge down Horowhenua Beach Road through the mud since there's no footpath here. So I didn't feel it appropriate to wear a suit and tie when I started out at 1 a.m. to get down the muddy road. Anyway, thank you for giving me some speaking rights, and the iwi is very grateful that we get some public speaking rights. As I indicated, we wanted to talk to item, is it C1, in your public excluded agenda. So while I understand there's sensitivities around the item, and I haven't seen the item, I have no idea what's in what's being presented to council. Well, I wanted to share the MTA's journey through the process for the proposed road consent. So I'm here representing MTA. I've been a board member on the Movement Control Authority for about 19 years now. And the experiences and the process that we went through with this consent was probably one of the most rigorous and, I won't hold my words back, disrespectful processes that we've ever endured. And so we started off with a relatively good relationship with HDC, working through the consent, developing consent conditions, developing mitigation to any concerns we had. We developed a number of cultural impact assessments and a cultural offsetting management plan and some consent conditions around the cultural offsetting management plan. We thought that those consent conditions would stand as they are and go forward through the consenting process with our support. Unfortunately, from our experience or our point of view, at the last minute, the consent conditions that we agreed to with HDC were changed unilaterally in relation to consultation with another iwi that had not been part of the process. What was then suggested was not acceptable to Movement Control Authority, and any other alternatives that were proposed did not meet our needs in mitigating our concerns around the consent as well. Our position at the moment is that if you proceed with the consent, we'll continue to fight the consent condition and fight the consent all the way through. We're unafraid to go to court and go all the way when they're passionate about ensuring their rights are protected. At this stage, I don't know what options you have in front of you around the consent, but our preferred option is that the consent does not proceed in its current form until adjustments have been made, rectifying the changes to the consent condition or the draft consent conditions. So that's my 5 minutes.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any questions for Jonathan? If you're not, thank you. I appreciate you coming, Jonathan. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll trudge back down Horowhenua Beach Road then.
Lyle, come and join us.
Okay, good morning Mayor Bernie, Deputy Mayor Mayor David, CEO Monique, and councillors and staff that are present today. I'm Lyle Brendan and currently, for my sins, President of the Foxton Beach Community Centre and Health Shuttles. Thank you for allowing me to present to you today. You will be discussing an agreement later on in your proceedings today, and I would just like to give you a little bit of background on that before you make decisions on that. I've presented to the council a few times over the last few years, but you've got some new councillors on board this year which need a bit of an update on what we're actually doing, so forgive me if I repeat things that you already know. So we at the Community Centre are going through a process that requires us to get agreement and support for a recommendation that is on your agenda from the Te Awaha Foxton Community Board. A brief background leading up to our request. We've been operating at the beach since the 1980s, servicing a community centre and operating health shuttles for residents of Foxton Beach, Foxton, Hamatangi Beach, Shannon and Waitariri Beach. Over the last 2 years, our passenger numbers have increased 60% year over year. We're currently doing 70 to 100 trips per week to Palmerston North, Levin, and also Wellington Hospital as well. Last month, just to give you an indication, our fuel bill was just over $4,000 for 1 month's worth of fuel. We've gone from 3 shuttles to 6 shuttles in the last 2 years, operating almost every day to keep up with the demand of our local residents. We also have a wheelchair-capable vehicle, and we now start at 6 a.m. 6 mornings a week to renal and chemotherapy patients in Palmerston North and Levin, which can include sometimes Sunday as well too, because they're doing extra runs on those ones. With -2-degree frost the last couple of mornings starting at 6 o'clock, with vehicles that are kept out in a section is not a good start for the day. We now have over 60 volunteers working at the centre, which is up from 32 years ago. We complete over 15,000 volunteer hours every year at the centre in the various activities that we do. Our new companion car service is being used more each week by residents who are isolated without transport or companionship. They are taken to any destination around Foxton and the beach for whatever reason they desire. Even fish and chips on the beach or a cup of coffee at a cafe. Currently operating 3 days a week, we can see this expanding more in time. Now to just the request that we have before you today. As some of you know, we built a new 3 shuttle garage on our site to house our then 3 shuttles 2 years ago. With 6 shuttles now in our fleet to cater for demand, we are again short of space. Currently 3 of our shuttles are being kept at a local resident section, which is not suitable for driver access every day or security for the vehicles. I think you may also know what our beach weather does to our vehicles. The council approved a 20-year lease on our current site in October 2024, so we are not going anywhere in a hurry. After 21 months, this lease has yet to be presented by council. With our current site, there is not enough room to build another 3-car garage, and we would like them all on the site where we can keep them secure and handy to the centre for our drivers to access. We have installed a new $7,000 alarm security system at our expense in our buildings as a result of 2 break-ins last year. We had previously spent around $5,000 on a camera surveillance system, and these would also be installed in a new garage. As the land that the recycling bin was on is a suitable area to build a new garage, giving us ample room, we would like to put in a request to yourselves to give us licence to occupy this land and build a new garage. Resource consent has been applied for and granted in February this year at a cost to us of $3,500. Obviously, we will be complying with district plans and building permits, but we can't start this planning process until we have approval from yourselves to do so. The process to just get here today has already taken 12 months for us to get here. I'd like to thank you for your time and also your ongoing support that you afford to our community and our residents of Foxton Beach. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Lyle. Thank you. Any questions for Lyle?
Well done. Thanks very much.
Appreciate your time, Lyle. Thank you. And again, all the work that you do in the Foxton Beach community and great to see the community centre thriving as it does.
That is. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Just noting Councillor Kutab, welcome, and also just acknowledging the chair of the Foxton Te Awaho Community Board that's in the room. Thank you, Ross. We'll get to you later. So we're now moving to late items, which there are none in the open agenda. Any declarations of interest? There are none.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll just do one bit.
Sorry, Councillor Olsen.
Sorry, just C2 and public excluded. I'll just remove myself from that, and then I've got an existing business relationship with them.
Thank you. So noted. All right. Confirmation of the minutes. We have the minutes from our meeting of June the 24th, 2026, and the public excluded meeting minutes of the same date. That they be accepted as a true and correct record. Second by Deputy Mayor Allen. All those in favour? Against? Carried. All right. Moving to our first report, which is 6.1, the amendments for the road naming and property numbering policy for 2026. On page 7 of our agenda. And Lisa, you made it work, I hear. That's good. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and councillors. This report sets out two key decisions for council to consider. The first is whether to adopt a road name register, being a list of potential road names, largely of local significance, that appear to meet the road naming and policy and property numbering policy that developers can choose from. While the initial intent of this register was for the names on it to be pre-approved by all parties, including external agencies such as LINZ, we have not been able to achieve this outcome, and even if developers were to select a name from this register, they will still need to go through an external approval process. While this means the full extent of efficiencies that we envisage won't be achieved, there will still be some sort of efficiency benefit in that the names on the register by and large meet the road naming policy, and therefore the approval process should be more straightforward. Adopting the register also allows the work done by parties who put forward names in the register to be utilised in some way, and provides a range of locally relevant and significant names for developers who aren't sure what to name their roads or don't provide the required 3 road names per road. This will potentially lead to a greater number of locally significant road names being used. The second aspect of today's report seeks an amendment to the road naming policy to provide a clear process for the renaming of state highways that are revoked from state highway status, which could occur as part of Te Pai o Tararua or Otuanau. This amendment makes clear that Council will lead the road naming process, including how and when and with whom consultation may occur. As the road revocation process for Te Pai o Tararua has yet to commence, it's a good time now for Council to consider this additional clause so that we're well placed to manage the road renaming when it becomes necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Any questions, clarifications? Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hi, Lisa. Hey, thanks for the further work on this policy. I'm very happy with where it's landing. Just the question around the pre-approval register, and I know that we had an intention that it would be a particular thing, and it hasn't turned out that way. But my question is, if under that pathway with the register, what would it look like, and what would the impacts be if through that pathway the check with the external agencies was led by council as opposed to the applicant or the developer? Would that potentially speed things up, or does it have resourcing implications? Because I'm trying to create I quite liked how we initially intended to have quite different pathways. One would be a bit speedier than the other. Is there a material impact if council was the lead on check step under that pathway?
I think it's probably more efficient if it is developer led, because the developer determines at what time they're going to apply for their certification of their subdivision, so they know what their lead time is, whereas council basically only knows when it gets presented to us. But if a developer hasn't done that pre-consultation, council officers do it as a matter of course anyway. So there's, I guess the developer has more control over the time when that happens.
Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate it. Oh, sorry, Councillor Mason.
Just a late question, just in response to attending the developer forum the other night, and a question was raised within the developer forum about iwi consultation by developers, and there was a preference indicated that developers would make the first connection with iwi, and then they could engage with council if they needed to facilitate that. Is that's still the intention within the document? That's clarified for them?
Yes, that was part of the April amendment that we made to the policies. That's at clause 6.1.4.
Can I just jump on that question? That follow on from that question?
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, following on from Councillor Mason's question, I think that the policy gives a week or there was a commitment from iwi to respond within a week to a request. And so what is the position if there is no response or no, if a developer is not able to secure a response?
The week time frame doesn't specifically sit in the policy, but it is a commitment that was sort of given during our consultation process. But if there was no response, then council officers would likely follow up with iwi, and then it is consultation rather than approval. So if there was no response, it would just sit as any other consultation with no response, and that would form part of the officer's report.
I think that's it, Lisa. Thank you. All right, so the recommendations are on page number 8, and they are A, that council adopt the proposed road name register as set out in the attachment to this report and the associated consequential changes to section 6.1 of the road naming and property numbering policy 2026. B, that council adopt the proposed amendments to section 6.3 and 6.4 of the road revocation and the road naming and property numbering policy as set out in the attachment to this report. Let's just take those first two recommendations. Do I have moved by Councillor Jennings, seconded by Councillor Fox? Anyone wish to speak to those recommendations? I'll put them therefore. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. And recommendation C, the Chief Executive be given delegated authority to make any minor, consequential and editorial changes to the wording of the road name register during the publishing of the road name register and the road naming and property numbering policy 2026 during the publication of any amendments as adopted. Second, moved by Councillor Olsen, seconded by Councillor Gray. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. I'm sure you're pleased that this has finally come to the table and been passed. Thank you. All right, 6.2. The application of budget caps within the rates for emission policy. Alison is coming to the table to introduce this item. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Burney. So this paper has been prepared to assist Council in considering whether the current approach to administering rates for emissions remains consistent with the policy that Council has adopted. So the rates for emission policy sets out who is eligible for rates relief, and by law, Council reviews that policy as part of the long-term plan, with any proposed changes consulted on with the community. Since 2024, annual funding limits have been applied to some remission categories. In practice, this has meant that two applicants who both meet the policy can receive different outcomes simply because one category has reached its funding limit whilst another has not. So the recommendation before you today does not change who is eligible for a remission, create any new remission categories, or increase the overall budget that Council has already approved through the annual plan. Instead, it removes those category funding limits so that applications are assessed consistently against the policy that Council has adopted. If Council wishes to change who should receive a remission or the level of assistance provided, that is fundamentally a policy decision. It should be considered through the formal review of the rates remission policy as part of the long-term plan process, where the community has its opportunity to have their say, rather than through those annual budget allocations of caps. Council will continue to approve the overall budget for rates remissions each year, and officers will continue to monitor expenditure through regular financial reporting. If the overall cost of remissions were to become unsustainable, that would be brought back to Council through the normal budgeting and policy review processes. And it's also worth noting that this has not historically been a financial affordability issue. So in each of the last 3 financial years, Council has collected more rates revenue net of remissions than was budgeted for. So actual rates revenue exceeded budget by $600,000 in 2022-23 before caps were implemented, 1.1 million in 23-24, again before the caps were implemented, and 600,000 in 24-25. This indicates that while some individual remission categories have exceeded their indicative budgets, Council has consistently achieved its overall rates revenue target. The issue before Council is therefore one of fairness and consistency in applying the policy rather than the overall affordability of the remissions themselves. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Alison? Alison Jennings.
Alison, so I was here when that decision to implement the caps was put in place, and I guess the question is the way in which I think you're saying that the way in which the policy objective, which was about prioritising people within the pool of and trying to control the overall bucket of money and then prioritise within it. Are you saying that the way that was implemented is not the right way, or are you saying just simply saying the better way would have been to implement the settings actually in the remissions policy itself?
Through you, Your Worship, probably a mix of both of those. So the way I understand what was put in place in 2024 was it was really about trying to cap the rates remissions that are given at about 1% of overall rates revenue. But what it hasn't considered is that it becomes a first in, first serve game. And the other thing it doesn't take into account is that we consistently seem to achieve more in penalty revenue than we budget as well. So there's other trade-offs that are happening in that overall position for rates revenue. So in terms of your rates, you've got things that you actually strike that people are due to pay. You've got your rates remissions, but you've also got your penalties, and that all filters into that one line around rates revenue.
It's just a follow-up question. So if Council wanted to make a deliberate decision to prioritise certain remission categories over others, and put a limit on the overall amount of money allocated for remissions, how would you achieve that other than putting a cap on certain categories?
through you, Your Worship, I guess my question would be, why would that be your approach? So I feel like there's work that will go through the long-term plan setting process, because why if somebody, it could even be that somebody has purchased a property throughout the year, so they didn't apply at the beginning of the year, but their financial circumstances have changed, and so they need to apply partway through the year. If they technically are eligible under all of the criteria, why is this person who just applied, a month earlier at an advantage compared to the person that's applied here? So I think there's a whole set of things that we need to do. Legislatively, you do not actually have to have remissions. There are all sorts of things that we can put in place. You could do it via a grants process. There's all sorts of things that could be looked at if you're wanting to limit what might come through in terms of remission requests, in terms of the eligibility of the policy. So either tighten up what you want to do in your policy, or you think about what is the outcome that you're trying to achieve. And if it is about capping that, then potentially the policies themselves are not the right way to achieve that.
Thank you so much, Alison, for bringing this forward. I know it's a really difficult time for everyone financially, so it's really good that we're having a look at this and you're trying to get that equality and that balance. Not being a financial person myself, in terms of removing the cap, how do we then ensure that we're not going to go way over budget, or we're going to get ourselves into a bit of a pickle financially?
So through you, Worship, so one of the things that has changed for the 26-27 financial year is that we've looked at what remissions were processed last year. We've then reflected that in terms of, so if we were to take that number, inflate it for the changes that have happened to rates overall, what should we therefore be setting our budget at? The one thing you need to remember around this table is that you'll adopt an annual plan or a long-term plan, and on day one of that being operational, your assumptions that you've made are outdated. So what we have seen is that some categories we would have perhaps provided in the sort of 80,000 realm of more remissions under that category, where we have other remissions that perhaps didn't actually meet the cap. So at this point in time, I feel confident in saying that if we let this play out as per the policies, yes, there will be overspend in budget potentially on remissions. We'll see uplift in penalty revenue that will also not meet the budget expectations, and it will all come out in the wash that we'll still land on our rates revenue expectations for the year. That's the more important underlying budget management item. As I said to Councillor Jennings earlier, is we need to understand what's the right mechanism to achieve the outcomes that you're wanting to have. So, for example, if you've got the Going for Growth strategic priority, there is some rates remission, there's also remissions in your DC policy, there's a number of things that we could address differently. So it's not about predetermining what your LTP policies will look like. It's really just saying, at this point in time, the way in which we're managing these, despite it being incredibly administratively onerous as well, but the way in which we're managing these things is perhaps based on that first in, first serve basis, which is not necessarily fair.
Sorry, can I be a pain? That's one last
You can be a pain.
Yeah, thanks. I often am. Paragraph 16, Alison, talks about the budget adopted for 26-27 increased from 630 to 760,000. I just can't remember us doing that as part of the annual plan. That's probably on me. But was the rationale for it was because of the oversubscription, was it?
So through you, Mayor Bernie, so there's a mix of it's quite complex behind the scenes. So there's a mix of remissions that are built into our rating system. in particular the one where we see that we have spent over budget for 25-26 in remissions, actually relates to our own council-owned utilities. I know there was a cap put on that where it would sit at a certain level, but in terms of the practicalities, that would require us to change system setups, probably with the help of the system provider, things like that. So it hasn't actually been implemented as per budget. And so it's not, we're not seeing the issues so much in the categories that are going to ratepayers. We are seeing them in terms of what we're doing internally being challenging.
Alison, is it still around that 1% of rates though, that total figure?
Yes, it is.
It is, yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right. So the recommendations are: A, the council agrees that annual budget caps will no longer be applied when assessing applications under the rates remission and postponement policy. The council confirms that applications will continue to be assessed against the eligibility criteria contained within the adopted rates remission and postponement policy, and that council requests the chief executive to continue monitoring overall rates remission expenditure and report any material variances through the council's regular financial reporting. That council notes that any future changes to eligibility criteria will be considered through a formal review of the rates remission and postponement policy, and that council notes that the 2026-27 rates remission budget has been adopted through the 26-27 annual plan. Moved by Councillor Fox, seconded by Councillor Young. Anyone wish to speak to those recommendations? Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, look, I'm a bit torn on this because I absolutely think and consider the advice from the team, and Alison was great in answering the questions. But as I say, when I was here when we implemented the caps, and for me at the time, I recall making the decision based on the importance of budget certainty, and so for me it was quite important that we did have those caps, and that we were essentially saying that some of these remissions are more important than others, and that we did want to have caps to manage that. So I'm a little bit like, well, why would we change this now? Why wouldn't we just allow it the caps to continue for the next 12 months, but then actually change the settings as part of our whole review for the long-term plan? So that's kind of where I'm sitting, is that why are we trying to do a quick fix now when the better thing might be to actually consider in detail the settings in terms of the remissions policy? So that's where my brain's sitting. But happy to be persuaded by others, and I think Councillor Grimstone's going to say something. So very interested to hear what others think.
Councillor Grimstone.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Jennings, for raising that. Look, I think this is just a scenario similar to the road naming policy that we've just adopted, that our intent doesn't necessarily match the reality of how it's paid up, and kind of what I've heard from officers is there's some complexity to how we apply it. There's a level of unfairness to ratepayers applying at different times, both qualifying and one getting it and one not. I think we've already allowed for the additional expected budget within our annual planning, that the additional resolution or motion that I've foreshadowed to councillors still provides us with that pathway for achieving essentially what you're wanting to do, which is have a look at the policy, review, strengthen it, and look at those weakenings anyway. So at this stage, I think it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But we can move forward now with removing the cap. The work's going to be done potentially around reviewing a prior to long-term plan, and we'll get a better policy. Best fits what we intend it to do and need it to do.
Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Mayor. I am in support of this. I hear what Councillor Jennings is saying, and I'm actually taking that view in the opposite intention, that by having the caps removed and there's a budget limit, it provides that flexibility so that one section's not used up and can't be somebody whose circumstances change throughout the year doesn't have access if there's money in the overall budget. So I actually feel it provides more flexibility to meet our residents' and ratepayers' needs than by having individual caps, which is why I'm in support of it. But I'm also in support of Councillor Grimstone, is that it probably does need a bit more work to make sure those intentions occur.
I'm also in support of this. If I had more meetings and phone calls about any subject that was on remission of land which had been zoned as residential when it was still basically lifestyle of rural, where the potential was seen as the reason for the rates rather than what actually was the land was being used for. And so I'm not surprised that those applications exceeded the budget, because they're often quite significant rates amounts that these people are facing. And so I know I recall too the amount of angst and time that we spent on trying to decide the amounts for each category in this remissions policy. But this, I think, simplifies it. It's, to me, fair across the board and not first in, first served policy, that it has got some flexibility to be able to do it. I'm also comforted by the fact that we now know that this is going to be a significant conversation through the long-term plan, and that we'll be able to dive deeper into the reasons and why we're doing, or why we have rates remission in the first place, and what it should do. So, comfortable with this recommendation. Councillor Mitchell-Kuta.
I just want to echo that in terms of, I feel very comfortable with Alison's proposal and her understanding of how this will land in the wash, and that we do have that flexibility of looking at this in the future. But one of my priorities and our priorities is ensuring that we are cost effective, and I think we've had strong indication from our public and our ratepayers that things are difficult for them, and if this can help reduce that across the board now without waiting too long, where people might feel as though they cannot scrape food on the table, then absolutely I support it. And as I said, with complete confidence in Alison's projections, and the fact that, as Mayor Burney has reiterated, we get to discuss this in the not too distant future.
Okay, I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour? Against? So noted. All right, passed. Thank you.
Bernie, can we propose to add an additional resolution or motion to that? I've previously foreshadowed that with councillors, and the democracy team has the revised wording that I also shared by email with councillors last night. That being, the council requests officers undertake a review of the rates remission policy and report back to council with findings and any recommended options for consideration as part of the long-term plan 2027-2037 development.
Are we doing a 10-year long-term plan? This isn't hard. Because in the past we've done a 20-year long-term plan, and I understood that couldn't be changed.
If I may, Mayor Burney, perhaps we just change that to being the 2027 long-term plan without the end.
Right, without an end date. Thank you. So, seconded by Councillor Fox. It's on the table. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Johnstone?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I put this resolution up because I believe it's timely ahead of the 2027 long-term planning process to have a comprehensive review. The rates remissions affect not only the recipients of the remission, but it's also the wider rating base that ultimately funds it. It's therefore appropriate that we periodically review the policy to ensure it remains fit for purpose, equitable, and financially sustainable. Increases to budgets of 100k plus year on year potentially isn't going to be financially sustainable in a future rate capping environment. There are a number of areas that warrant closer examination, including eligibility criteria, the duration of remissions, review mechanisms, and whether the policy continues to achieve the outcomes originally intended. Importantly, this resolution is about giving officers the opportunity to undertake the work and report back with recommendations around any significant changes that would need to be considered, and I see this as good governance. It's an opportunity for any elected members who have an interest or increased interest in particularly reviewing this policy and being involved in that review to indicate a willingness to do so. And this will allow us to take an evidence-based approach, consider the broader impacts on all ratepayers, and ensure the policy remains transparent, fair, but most importantly sustainable for the future.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to this? Councillor Jennings.
Just a point of clarification for either the mover or the chief executive. In terms of the scope of the review, would you envisage that elected members would, at an early stage, signal what's kind of within scope, what's outside of scope, or is the intention that the long-term plan review of the policy was kind of from beginning to end anyway?
Through your worship, councillors will recall the earlier workshops that were held throughout June, where you started kind of framing what was important as you think about the financial strategy for the 2027 long-term plan. My expectation is if this motion was to pass, the work that Alison and her team had already anticipated would build off some of those signals council had given from the June workshops, but we would quite early on be seeking from elected members some refinement on scope around the rates remission policy, acknowledging its alignment with your priority around financial discipline and the review also of the revenue and financing policy. Because as you know, and as Alison has articulated today, these policies don't sit in isolation. They are connected to other pieces of policy that tell your community a story about how we're going to allocate revenue and expenditure. So yes, we would seek refinement.
All right, so I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. All right, moving on to 6.3, the Horowhenua Road West Recreation Reserve proposed land exchange, and welcome Brent to the table. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you, Mayor Burney. Good morning, councillors. The report in front of you today seeks council approval to commence the statutory process under Section 15 of the Reserves Act to exchange part of the Horowhenua Road West Recreation Reserve with the adjoining land owned by Grenadier Limited. The proposed exchange gives effect to Council's previous decision to establish a permanent walkway from Horowhenua Road West to the beach as part of the Douglas Links Golf Course development. The need for the exchange has arisen through the detailed design of the walkway, which has identified an opportunity to improve both the environmental and the long-term reserve outcomes. The revised alignment protects the established native kānuka, while ensuring the land that contains a public walkway retains in Council's ownership. The proposal does not change the intent of the previous Council's decisions or reduce public access. Rather, it provides a better environmental outcome while securing a permanent public access to the beach. If approved, the proposal will proceed through the statutory process under the Reserves Act, including public notification, and, if supported, following that process, ministerial approval. Thank you. Oh, and just for clarification, I have put another map in front of all the councillors, and apologies for any confusion in the earlier versions. But quickly to talk to that, we're essentially swapping the area in red with the area in blue, and Council retains the area in purple. Thank you.
Any questions for Councillor Mason?
Just a point of clarification that the proposed, or the golf course that's being built, is in the white dotted area that runs that area there, is it?
Thank you, Councillor Mason. The golf course area is actually being built in this area here. To the south.
To the south.
To the south.
Yeah.
Okay.
There appears to be no further questions. Thank you, Brent. So the recommendation is that Council approves the exchange of part of the Horowhenua Road West Recreation Reserve with adjoining land owned by Grenadier Limited under Section 15 of the Reserves Act 1977 in accordance with Attachment A, subject to completion of final survey, completion of all statutory requirements under the Reserves Act 1977, ministerial approval by Gazette, and completion of all legal documentation necessary to give effect to the exchange, and completion of any equalisation payment required under Section 15 of the Reserves Act 1977, that Council delegates authority to the Chief Executive to undertake all actions necessary to progress the proposed exchange and complete all statutory, legal and administrative requirements, excluding the Council resolution required under Section 15.2 of the Reserves Act 1977. Moved by Councillor Mitchell-Kutab, seconded by Councillor Fox. Anyone wish to speak to that recommendation? Right, put that recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Right, 7.1, the Mayoral Report. I'll move that Council receive and note this report. Seconded by Councillor Jennings. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Any questions from anyone? If not, we'll move on to the Te Awaho Foxton Community Board Chairperson's report. Welcome Ross to the table. We'll just move, while Ross is coming to the table, move that the report be received. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Allen. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Welcome, Ross.
Thanks, Mayor Benny. Thank you very much, and thank you, councillors, for giving us the opportunity to in front of you this morning. Just really highlight, if they take the report as read, obviously. Just a couple of things to highlight really for the board. The three things. In terms of Nature's Call, really just an appreciation to Monique for allowing a little bit extra time for the board to do a bit of work around the submission. As you'll see in the report, obviously, community board members very topical. That part of the district in terms of the Manawatu River and its where it comes through the beach and Foxton communities. So board members just want to take a little bit extra time just to look at whether a joint submission was the best way to go. And Malik allowed us that time, and I think the willingness also, Malik, to Probably allow the submission from the board to be beefed up that little bit. I think that made a big difference to the board, and I think the joined up submission speaks volumes between the board and council. So we're keen to get that across the line. In terms of Fox and Futures, I think the move to align the work of the board with Fox and Futures is already paying dividends. In terms of the board members being able to work side by side with those theme groups, get out within the area up there and work across those theme groups, I think is producing really good results. It's giving structure to the work of the board and strengthening those relationships. I think that we'll see some really good outcomes from that. So it's really good to see that coming together. And really finally, just again highlight, you'll see the minutes later in the report that you would have noted from our 6th of July meeting, acknowledging Lyle's submission earlier today. You'll note that the board was very supportive, unanimously supportive of expansion of that community centre. Just again acknowledging the work that they do up there is phenomenal. They service that community where you've probably heard it said before, but I'll say it again, where it allows people to live in that community that would normally not be able to do so because of transport constraints. There's 60 odd volunteers, 6 vehicles. It's an amazing bit of work that they do and they continue to do. Every Saturday morning you go through there's fundraising in terms of the op shop garage sale that they run every Saturday morning. So the commitment from the people in that community centre are huge, acknowledging a bit of work to do around the recycling centre, but again, very unanimous within the community board to support that expansion. So interested in the outcome of that when it comes to the table. Thanks, Bernie. That's any questions I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Ross. Just a question from me, maybe. Any sense or comment you'd like to make about the Head Start backstop proposals and your feelings of what the community in Foxton are saying?
Haven't had a lot of feedback from the community yet. I think it's probably still something that people are, if they're aware of it, hasn't really gained too much traction yet. The little bit of feedback I did have was, I think personally that I had from a couple of quarters was the need to align ourselves with councils that geographically fit to how we do, and it's probably north and south, which is probably where we're at anyway, but not a huge amount. I think within board members there's the question asked already, okay, what does that mean for community boards? Does that mean strengthening community boards? Does it mean, and I guess it's answers that we don't have yet. So, but I think the board are very interested and again keen to work alongside council to get the best outcomes.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell-Kidder.
I just want to say I've heard so much about the community centre and the work that your wider community in Foxton actually does, and I know that in my conversations with a lot of community-based groups here and organisations, they look really favourably to your area and what you're doing and what you're supplying and supporting in terms of your community. So, yeah, congratulations to everyone on that selfless work that everybody does. It makes such a big difference.
Thank you, Ross. All right, we're now moving to 8.1, which is the Local Government Funding Agency final statement of intent. And there's a recommendation that Council receive and note this report. Do I have a mover? Councillor Mitchell-Kitab and Councillor Grimstone moving and seconding. Any questions about this report at all? Being none, I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, 8.2, the Interim Organisation Performance Report for July 2026. And if there are any questions while you're thinking about that, just move receipt of this report. Councillor Young and Councillor Mitchell-Kitab, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Any questions of the report? Alison, did you want to introduce some of the financial performance?
Yes, please, Mayor Bernie. Through you, Your Worship, you will have noted that we have provided a supplementary piece of reporting over the financial results. So that was based on a conversation that was had that potentially the gauges and the commentary that was beside that was a little bit confusing. So this is what we've tried to do is revert back to the full OPR type reporting for this purpose. So the supplementary paper aims to provide members with a clearer picture of Council's draft year-end financial performance. The one-page summary reflects a more recent draft than the OPR that you've got in the agenda, so some figures, particularly capital expenditure, have been updated. The results remain subject to completion of year-end accounting processes, including capitalisation and the final depreciation calculation, but they provide a reliable indication of Council's underlying financial performance. The favourable draft operating result reflects a combination of operational efficiencies, the timing of the capital program, and stronger than budgeted revenue. Careful management of vacancies, consultancy and discretionary expenditure contributed to the result, while delays in completing some capital projects meant lower interest and depreciation costs for the year. These are genuine savings for 25-26, although they will naturally reduce as projects are completed and the associated borrowing and assets come into service. Overall, the financial position remains strong despite pressures from storm response, fuel costs and the establishment of Central District Waters, and operating revenue finished 3.2 million above budget, whilst much of the expenditure variance relates to fully recoverable Central District water costs. Members will also note the capital program underspend, which primarily reflects the timing of project delivery rather than cancelled or intentionally deferred projects. So a separate report on carry forwards will be presented to Council, aiming to get that to you for next week's meeting. We are still trawling through a whole heap of transactions to make sure what we bring is as accurate as possible. From a treasury perspective, net debt closed the year at approximately 180 million, representing 109% of operating income. This remains comfortably within Council's financial strategy limit of 250% and below the annual plan forecast. While this reflects prudent debt management, it also reflects the timing of the capital program, with borrowing expected to increase as carried forward projects are delivered. Overall, the draft results demonstrate that Council has maintained strong financial discipline while continuing to invest in essential infrastructure. I'm happy to take any questions on the financial side of things.
Anyone have any questions for Alison? Councillor Brimstone.
Yeah, Alison, just picking up on the net debt position. So 180 mil below where we forecasted we were going to be. We've got the 16 mil that's going to be carried over. Do you foresee that putting any pressure on our forecast for end of year as a result of that 16 mil carryover, or essentially we'll land in the same position that we would have?
So through you, Mayor Burney, you will, so when we provide that carry forwards report, we'll actually do a bit of a reconciliation so you can see what it means in terms of the debt based on the carry forwards amount that is below what is actually available. So what people haven't spent, they're not taking over the full amount. So we won't be taking over the full debt position either. So we should actually have a more favourable position moving forward. But just please bear with me because, as I said, these are draft numbers and they do tend to jump around depending on where we've got to in terms of capitalisations, etc., depreciation, and what that overall picture looks like.
Yeah, through your worship, if I could just add to that, your councillors will recall that typically you're not getting end of year financial results till September, and so we've deliberately put pressure on the team to provide some in the interim organisation performance report. You've got another version today. It will shift, but what you're getting a feel for is overall financial performance, which reflects the updates that we've given you in the last 12 months. The difference is that sometimes in that interim focused reporting, it's far more on kind of the fixed operating costs versus obviously the annual report. It's about how all those costs come together and the complexity that's particularly driven in a council environment around depreciation and interest.
Thanks, Alison. Apologies for causing you to go and do a whole lot more work, and I'm probably still confused a little bit about some of the supplementary things you've given us, but we'll have a conversation at some stage about those. Thank you. Any other questions around the organisation performance report? Just one comment from me around the delivery of the Land Transport Capital Program. Road resurfacing, road rehabilitation and road improvements and pathway renewals and improvements. Great to see those sorts of things which our community are often complaining about being done to the level that they are, and the good work that continues in that space. I often feel that it doesn't really matter what we do. It's probably not enough, but anyway, appreciate all the good stuff that goes into that activity. All right, we'll move on. 8.3, the elected member attendance statistics. I'll move that the report be received and noted. Councillor Young seconding. All those in favour? Against, carried. I assume there's no commentary around that. We'll move to 8.4, the Council Resolution Actions Monitoring Report for July 2026. I'll move that the report be received. Seconded by Councillor Olsen. All those in favour? Against, carried. Any items in that report that councillors wish to highlight? All right, there being none, let's move to 9.1, the proceedings of the Community Funding and Recognition Committee from the 1st of July. We'll receive those minutes and note them. Seconded by Councillor Mitchell-Kutab. All those in favour? Against, carried. Any items in those minutes that people wish to talk to? Right, moving to 9.2, the proceedings of the Te Awaho Foxton Community Board of the 6th of July. We've got a number of recommendations there. Let's just move the first one, that Council receive and note these minutes. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Allen. All those in favour? Against, carried. The next one relates to the Foxton Beach Community Centre area, and we've already heard from Lyle. So there's no any clarification being sought on any of those recommendations, or do you need further information that's not contained in the minutes? All right, so the recommendations are that B, that Council approve the extension of the Foxton Beach Community Centre occupied area to include the land currently utilised as the Foxton Beach Seasonal Mobile Recycling Service. C, the Council approve the relocation of the Foxton Beach Seasonal Recycling Service. D, the Council direct the Chief Executive to negotiate and prepare a formal lease agreement with the Foxton Beach Community Centre, including provisions relating to maintenance responsibilities, utilities, rates, insurance and other occupation-related costs. And E, that Council fund the relocation of the mobile recycling service costs from the Foxton Beach Endowment Fund. Moved by Councillor Fox, seconded by Councillor Mitchell-Kutab. Anyone wish to speak to those recommendations? Councillor L.
No, just briefly, E in particular, that the costs will sit within the endowment fund, and I think that's appropriate and that's good.
All right, put those recommendations. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. All right, that brings us to the end of our open agenda. We'll now move the motion that that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting. where we will discuss C1, the Levin Water Supply Page Road Reservoir Consenting Pathway, C2, the Shannon Bulk Haulage Lease Update, C3, the proceedings of the Procurement Review Group from the 7th of July, C4, the procurement decision around electricity, C5, procurement decision, Levin Wastewater Treatment Plant Headworks Project, C6, the procurement decision for Cambridge Bath Kent Water Main Renewal, C7, procurement decision Tauranga Road and Queen Street West Water Main, C8, council resolution and actions monitoring report, and it will be C9, the public excluded late agenda regarding respective delegation. Do I have a second for that, please? Councillor Gray, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Right, let's have a 5-minute break while we just set up